Al Jardine and Brian Wilson, two names inextricably linked with the legend of the Beach Boys, the band that shaped surf rock and psychedelic pop. For decades, the world witnessed the ups and downs of their relationship, from the hits they created together to the hidden, lingering conflicts. However, at 82 years old, Al Jardine has finally broken his silence, unveiling a shocking secret that fans have long wondered about. What caused him to develop negative feelings, even dislike towards Brian Wilson? Now the veil of secrecy will be lifted, revealing untold truths about the deep-seated reasons for this rift. Let's delve into the hidden corners of the Beach Boys' history and discover exactly what made Al Jardine dislike Brian Wilson, a revelation that may change how you view these two music icons. Al Jardine and the final moment that revealed the mystery of Brian Wilson. The Beach Boys formed in 1961, with Al Jardine and Brian Wilson as core members, quickly became one of history's greatest family music phenomena. With over 100 million albums sold and an esteemed place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they shaped a radiant part of California culture. Yet behind that dazzling facade lay a complex web of internal relationships that eventually fractured due to deep rifts. Dennis Wilson once bluntly stated, "Brian Wilson is the Beach Boys. He is the band. We're his damn messengers. He is everything, period. We're nothing. He is everything." This assertion not only sketched Brian's absolute creative dominance, but also implicitly hinted at the enormous pressure weighing on other members, especially Al Jardine. That absolute control was the initial seed of simmering tensions, particularly after Brian suffered a severe mental breakdown that led him to withdraw completely from touring, a pivotal moment that permanently changed the group's dynamic. For decades, the relationship between Jardine and Wilson has experienced significant ups and downs. From carefree days as schoolmates and soccer teammates, they became co-founders of a legendary band, and finally, a complex friendship woven from both deep admiration and bitter conflicts. Although Jardine later rejoined Brian for the Pet Sounds tour in 2006 and frequently performed with him from 2012 onwards, the story of the true cause of the initial rift and the negative feelings Al Jardine may have harbored towards Brian Wilson remained a mystery until now. In May 2025, a fateful encounter took place, bringing an unexpected answer. Al Jardine, 82, along with his wife Mary Ann, decided to visit Brian Wilson at his home in Carmel, California during their trip. Neither man could have known that this would be their final conversation, a moment destined to reveal the hidden depths of a 6-decade relationship. When Jardine entered the room, Brian Wilson, seemingly unaffected by illness, unexpectedly looked him straight in the eye and declared hauntingly, "You're the one who started the band." This straightforward statement stunned Jardine. "I said, 'Well, Brian, thank you, but you had a little something to do with it too,'" Jardine recalled. This moment held immense significance. In the context of decades of Brian Wilson being lauded as the Beach Boys' soul brain, this belated acknowledgement from Brian himself lifted an invisible burden and latent discomfort that Jardine may have carried for so long. It not only concluded their musical journey, but also closed a long chapter of overshadowing where Jardine's contributions might not have been adequately recognized. For Jardine, this unexpected admission brought a sense of liberation, almost an atonement. "I went, wow. Okay. Yeah, I did have something to do with it, so that was a huge honor," he mused. This statement particularly resonated because it echoed their first meaningful interaction back in junior college at El Camino, when Jardine was the one who proactively told Wilson, "Brian, we've got to start a band together." Brian's acknowledgement of Jardine's initial role right before his death wasn't just a tribute, but could also be a belated recognition of the emotional burden and potential injustice Brian had inadvertently created for his bandmate throughout the years of creative dominance. This was the key factor that helped Al Jardine release the dislike, or at least deep resentment, he may have secretly held regarding the imbalance of power and recognition. During this visit, Jardine also observed Wilson receiving medical care. He was having oxygen issues, but his oxygen came back, Jardine noted. Based on the nurse's positive assessment, Jardine left believing Wilson was recovering. "I thought he was going to be better," he said, making Wilson's death about a month later even more shocking. Nevertheless, these final moments brought Jardine a sense of peace. He revealed that Wilson passed peacefully in his sleep, adding, "I was grateful for that." He also mentioned that Wilson found contentment in his final days, surrounded by family who loved him. This passing, foreshadowed by the symbolic acknowledgement, finally allowed Al Jardine not only to speak the truth about their complex relationship, but also to find peace and understanding about one of the most important relationships in his life, helping him soothe old wounds and explain what made him dislike Brian Wilson in the past. When Acknowledgment speaks, beyond the shocking declaration acknowledging Al Jardine's pioneering role in founding the Beach Boys, a moment that redefined the historical perspective of the band and their relationship, Brian Wilson maintained a deep connection with music and those close to him, even as his health steadily declined. Jardine revealed a touching detail. Every Tuesday, members of the Brian Wilson Band would visit Wilson's home and perform privately for him. He didn't participate directly, but the idea was for him to be immersed in the music. "It was truly wonderful," Jardine explained. This weekly musical ritual was more than just a performance. It was a vivid testament to Wilson's ongoing bond with his foster family, as Jardine affectionately called the band. Although Brian stopped touring after 2022 when signs of decline began to appear, and he became more silent, these intimate home performances allowed him to stay connected to the musical essence that had shaped his entire life. This not only shows Brian's dedication to his art, but also subtly expresses his respect for the musicians who had accompanied him, including Jardine, who remained an indispensable part of his musical world. That deep respect was further solidified by Jardine's emotional description of Wilson as a humble giant who took the notes everyone else had and made a new musical language out of them. This praise, coming from someone who might once have harbored deep negative feelings, shows that despite past conflicts and disagreements, admiration for Brian's extraordinary musical talent remained a strong bond. It was precisely this musical connection and Brian's final moments that helped Jardine reevaluate their entire complex relationship, finding forgiveness and understanding, and more fully revealing what truly made him dislike Brian Wilson, and more importantly, how he overcame it. Cracks reveal Al Jardine's negative emotions. Brian Wilson's deteriorating mental health in the late 1960s became a fateful turning point, permanently altering the Beach Boys' dynamics and creative direction. The harmonious collaboration once shared between Wilson and Al Jardine, the foundation of the band's early success, gradually transformed into a relationship marked by distance and simmering tensions. This shift sowed the seeds for complex emotions, including the frustration and perhaps even dislike that Al Jardine would later express. In 1964, a pivotal event occurred. Wilson experienced his first major panic attack on a flight to Houston, forcing him to immediately return home. Glenn Campbell temporarily replaced him on tour. Things grew more serious when Wilson suffered a complete breakdown in December 1964, leading to his decision to permanently withdraw from touring to focus on songwriting and production. This decision created a huge void in the band's live performances. Jardine and the other members had to shoulder the responsibility of maintaining the group's stage presence without their key creative force. Having to continue performing and facing the pressure of upholding the band's image in the leader's absence likely created resentment and a burden for Jardine, contributing to his later negative feelings. After Wilson's withdrawal from touring, Jardine not only took on additional vocal and instrumental responsibilities, but also maintained regular contact with Wilson, frequently visiting his home studio to collaborate on new music. According to band associates, Jardine was persistent in encouraging Wilson to continue participating in recording sessions as he recognized the irreplaceable quality of Brian's musical vision. Throughout the challenging Smile album recordings, Jardine remained one of Wilson's most consistent supporters, even as other band members expressed frustration with Wilson's increasingly experimental and sometimes incomprehensible direction. Jardine's patience and loyalty during this period demonstrate his deep respect for Brian's talent, but simultaneously, it could also have been a source of tension as he had to stand between Brian and the rest of the band. However, perhaps the most damaging factor to Brian Wilson's relationship with Jardine and the other band members was the appearance of the controversial psychologist Dr. Eugene Landy in 1975. Initially hired to help Wilson overcome drug addiction and mental health issues, Landy quickly gained almost complete control over Wilson's life. Under Landy's influence, Wilson became increasingly isolated from the band members, leading Jardine to describe this period as watching Brian disappear behind a wall. Landy not only restricted Wilson's contact with his former collaborators, but also monitored his communications and even influenced his musical decisions. The isolation of Jardine and close friends from Brian, being deprived of the ability to support and collaborate, created deep distress and a sense of helplessness. Furthermore, Landy's annual fee of $430 created significant financial strain within the band's business structure, adding another layer of financial conflict to an already complex relationship. This toxic relationship continued until 1992, when Landy was prohibited from contacting Wilson via a restraining order after Wilson's family complained about his excessive control. It was precisely these years of Wilson being isolated and controlled by Landy that became the peak of frustration and resentment for Al Jardine, forcing him to face a Brian. Wilson he no longer recognized a Brian stripped of his freedom and independent creative ability, and this was likely the deepest source of the dislike Al Jardine experienced. Why Jardine felt betrayed by Wilson's choices. Despite their long-standing friendship and a glorious shared musical history, tensions between Al Jardine and Brian Wilson significantly escalated in the mid-1970s due to deep creative differences. Jardine, who played a crucial role in shaping the Beach Boys, from its inception, increasingly felt his contributions were being diminished. This shift occurred as Wilson, after years of reduced involvement, began to reassert almost absolute control over the group's musical direction. This very shift in power created a profound sense of betrayal in Jardine. Throughout the 1970s, Wilson worked to reclaim his position as the band's primary creative force. This change led Jardine and other members to find themselves with reduced involvement in album production and song selection. Jardine, who had stepped up and taken on more responsibility during Wilson's absence by contributing vocals and songwriting, suddenly found himself sidelined. Brian would come in with everything already decided, Jardine later commented bitterly. It was like our ideas didn't matter anymore. This feeling of being marginalized, of having his own efforts and contributions dismissed, was a significant factor leading to resentment and a sense of betrayal. The flashpoint of the conflict came with Wilson's 1977 Adult Child album project. This collection featured Wilson's experimental big band arrangements, a complete departure from the Beach Boys' established familiar sound. When presented to the group and record executives, the album faced immediate rejection. Jardine, along with Mike Love, strongly opposed its release, seeing it as commercially suicidal and going against the band's identity. Consequently, the album was shelved, creating lasting resentment between Wilson and the band members who vetoed his creative vision. For Jardine, this period represented a painful dilemma. He had to choose between supporting his friend's artistic expression and protecting the commercial future of the very band he helped build. Having to choose between personal loyalty and collective interest left Jardine feeling torn and ultimately hurt. Furthermore, Jardine expressed deep frustration with Wilson's increasing focus on solo projects. When Wilson began collaborating with musicians outside the band, Jardine viewed this as a betrayal of the shared identity they had painstakingly built. "We built this band together," Jardine stated in a 1978 interview. "Going solo felt like abandoning what we created." These words clearly convey the feeling of abandonment and hurt when Brian considered the band's heart sought separate artistic paths. However, years later, Jardine demonstrated greater maturity and understanding by acknowledging Wilson's need for artistic freedom and eventually joined Wilson's touring band in 2012. This act shows that although old wounds may have remained, the deep musical connection between them transcended past grievances, allowing Al Jardine to finally find peace and explain what made him dislike Brian Wilson. It wasn't personal animosity, but deep disappointment with choices that hurt their shared legacy and friendship. Revealed riffs and Al Jardine's negative emotions. The profound musical rift between Al Jardine and Brian Wilson was not just a painful chapter in the Beach Boys' history, but also permanently altered the career trajectories of both men, leaving an indelible mark on the band's musical legacy. This feud, or with its complex emotions and creative disagreements, created parallel legacies, both celebrating and complicating the story of one of the greatest bands of all time. After the intense creative disputes of the 1970s, Al Jardine diligently maintained his connection to the Beach Boys' legacy through continuous touring. He did not let personal conflicts overshadow his commitment to the music. To assert his musical identity and continue honoring the compositions that shaped his career, Jardine formed Al Jardine's Family and Friends in 1998. This group, with his son Matt Jardine taking on many of Wilson's original vocal parts, performed the band's classic catalogue. This allowed Jardine not only to maintain his position as an indispensable part of the Beach Boys, but also to demonstrate a legacy-driven approach, keeping the group's music alive. In essence, Jardine's approach demonstrated his steadfast commitment to preserving the band's core sound, even without Brian Wilson's direct involvement. His performances consistently emphasized the distinctive vocal harmonies and intricate instrumental arrangements that were the group's hallmark style. In this way, Jardine maintained the authenticity and quality of the Beach Boys' music, despite the absence of the primary creative brain. This was an effort to protect the band's legacy from the betrayal he felt from Wilson's past choices. This rift ultimately led to the Beach Boys brand splitting into various touring factions, causing confusion and even division among fans. In the early 2000s, Mike Love led the officially licensed Beach Boys group, while Jardine toured separately. Concurrently, Brian Wilson also launched his own tours, focusing on performing iconic full albums like Pet Sounds and Smile. This created a three-way situation for how audiences experienced the band's music, forcing fans to choose which legacy version of the band to support. This fragmentation, a direct consequence of internal tensions, reshaped how the public perceived and experienced the Beach Boys. Jardine had a brief collaboration with Brian Wilson during the Pet Sounds anniversary tour in 2006, although this reunion was temporary. The division of touring rights also led to ongoing legal complexities, with Jardine continuously challenging Mike Love's exclusive licensing rights to the Beach Boys name. This shows that the feud wasn't limited to emotional or creative aspects, but also extended to business affecting the rights and legacy of each member. However, it's noteworthy that throughout decades of estrangement and bitter disputes, Jardine always acknowledged Brian Wilson's extraordinary musical talent. In contrast to professional disagreements and feelings of betrayal, Jardine's public statements consistently lauded Wilson's unique songwriting ability and innovative production techniques. "Brian is still the most talented musician I've ever known," Jardine declared in a 2018 interview. This acknowledgement culminated in their final reunion during Wilson's Pet Sounds and Smile tours, where Jardine willingly took on a supportive role. His participation in these performances demonstrated that deep artistic respect ultimately transcended personal grievances, allowing both individuals to fully celebrate their shared musical legacy together. The feud shaped Jardine into a guardian of the Beach Boys' original sound, someone who consistently fought for recognition of his contributions, and ultimately someone who could find peace and forgiveness, allowing Brian Wilson's legacy to shine even with old scars still present. The echo of a friendship, a legacy. As we've followed the ups and downs in the relationship between Jardine and Brian Wilson, we can't help but feel a poignant realization: no matter how many storms life brings, how many misunderstandings, and even unspoken pains, music always remains an eternal bond. You see, our lives are similar. We might have close friends, relationships we spent our youth building, but then time events, and sometimes personal choices lead us apart, creating misunderstandings and even unspoken pains we keep hidden. Have you ever wondered if there were words left unsaid, hugs left ungiven, only to look back and feel regret? Al and Brian's story reminds us of the power of understanding, compassion, and most importantly, forgiveness. Not just forgiveness for others, but also forgiveness for ourselves, for the emotional burdens we've carried. When Jardine persistently protected the Beach Boys' legacy, still honoring Brian Wilson's talent despite deep disagreements, it wasn't just professionalism. It was a steadfast affection that transcended all storms. Have you ever experienced such a complex